Welcome to the Cherry Picker After Dark, the Patreon exclusive version of the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zach Cherry, and with me, as always, is...
I can't push you down that hill! Eddie of Edward is Truth.
And in this month's Cherry Picker After Dark, we are doing... officially, I have titled this Final Girls, Originals versus Remake. So make of that what you will, but we have 8 distinct pairs of original Final Girls and their remake counterparts, and we are going to compare and contrast sort of the difference in the evolution, and this is going to be based on a lot of different criteria. But at the end of that, or not the end, as we go through, we're going to rank them in the same style that we did way back when we did the Final Girl rankings for the Cherry Picker After Dark, which was a while ago. But we don't remember specifically. I have them written down where some of these characters were, because most of them we did include on that list, but a lot of these are new to us. And essentially, how we picked these is we wanted to only cover movies that we've talked about on the podcast thus far. Isn't that right, Edward?
I mean, kind of, yeah. I mean, in the case of House on Haunted Hill, we covered the remake.
We did the reverse,
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, something that we have talked about or definitely will talk about later. Something like that. I don't know. Good.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we just kind of want to go through that. And we're not necessarily going to be talking about the remakes themselves. It's just one specific component of it as the Final Girl. But I'm sure that there's going to be remake discourse that comes out, because a lot of what these characters do kind of is reflective of the movie itself. So I just want to say really badly, though, because, the last 2 days, I had to binge watch a lot of these. And I skimmed through most of them just to watch the scenes of the actual character.
The Final Girls. Yeah.
And this has given me, a newfound hatred of remakes. And I've always said that, I would prefer a remake over a prequel, because I think that prequels are such redundant stories to tell, but it's still new material, whereas I was watching some of these and they felt so soulless to the point where I just I was bored and frustrated, and that was while skimming through some of these movies. So the 2000s are my least favorite period for the horror genre, and a lot of that has to do with these movies.
I mean, I have to say, I think I am in partial agreement with you regarding the Final Girl's relationship to the movies, because another thing that was jumping out at me as I was moving through them myself, rescreening, particularly the ones I'm not as familiar with, that I saw once or a handful of times, and that I don't return to with great fondness year after year, and a lot of them were the remakes. But looking at it through a lens of just identifying the Final Girl alone and not paying attention to the movie at large, because that's not what we're unpacking in this discussion, it actually made some of them a little bit more digestible for me. It made it a little bit easier, because I think in every case but one, my opinion, and I'll tell you when we get there, the actor who is portraying the Final Girl is doing her damn best, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so it makes it a little bit easier if I'm just using her as a point of entry, which I usually do anyway, but a lot of other things influence your ride through a movie. But but in this particular screening sessions, I was really kind of impressed by how resilient some of these women were, especially when they weren't handed material that was servicing them. They had to kind of work in service of the material and uplift it and make it better.
No, you couldn't have said it better, or I couldn't have said it better myself. Because I completely agree, and I tried to watch them with that mindset. And just performance-wise, I didn't have a problem with anyone, so I'm curious to see who the one person was that you did. I kind of have a feeling I know, but I'll when we get there,
when we get there,
I'll say. So I guess, I mean, that could be a criteria of what we're looking at is like the performance as well. But I think that that's such a minuscule thing. But for me, like a lot of my complaints really did come down to the writing, because I did think that, and I agree when you say that they did exactly what they needed to do. But at the end of the day, it was just that the material at hand was so abysmal for a lot of these, especially, that I absolutely could not, like, they didn't even get a chance to be a character that, and not to show mine or your hands that soon, because I don't want to say that all of the originals are better than the remakes, because this might come out in conversation, but for a lot of them, it did feel like a downgrade. So that's, what we're going to be talking about a lot here is just, where they did improve, where they kind of regressed, and we're just going to have a good time. And I'm really excited to talk about this. I was kind of dreading it for a while, because first of all, because of all the content that I had to watch for it. But yeah, I mean, today, just leading up to this, I'm just like, no, I'm ready. So without any further ado I just want to remind anyone who is listening, who is not a Patreon supporter, that this is a free preview, at least for, the first 30 or so minutes. So we will go through the first two pairs that we are going to compare and contrast. And then at that point, we will bid you farewell. And if you would like to continue listening, you can head over to my Patreon account, Zach Cherry, ZackCherry, and subscribe at the Freddy Krueger tier, where you will get access to this full episode, as well as our back catalog of all the other Cherry Picker After Darks, including the aforementioned Final Girl rankings. I believe it was 86 different Final Girl characters that we ranked in this same template that we're about to tell you here. So you can check that out. Also, any tier on Patreon that you are subscribed to will get you early access to all of our regular episodes of the Cherry Picker. So something to keep in mind if you do love this podcast and you have been listening for a while, or you just want to support us. So we greatly appreciate all of your help in that regard, and also greatly appreciative to our editor, Boy Cried Wolfe. So thank you very much to him, as always. And with that said, Edward, what are the tier rankings, or the tiers, the quotes?
Okay, it's always fun to spiral downwards. So We're going to start at the top.
As we usually do.
Right. Top tier is I'm Into Survival, Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Tier just below that is I Can Handle a Sick Old Woman, or I Can Handle a Sick Old Woman. Either psycho, take your pick. Lila Crane. And then below that is someone who didn't make the discussion tonight, but What Is Going On? By our own Adrienne King, playing Alice in the first Friday the 13th, because there isn't really an Alice counterpart. I mean,
no,
maybe
I don't consider Friday the 13th 2009 to be a remake of Friday the 13th, because it's, I mean, the first like 2 minutes or whatever, when like Mrs. Voorhees is there, that's absolutely a remake of the end of the original. But like from the rest of the movie, by and large, is just a sequel. It's like a different, like a convergent timeline.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Just below that, another Final Girl who didn't make it because she's not in an OG. She's in a sequel. A Guy Hates a Girl Who Comes On Too Strong. And that is Rachel from Halloween 4. Is that one what was the return? The curse?
That was the return. Oh, come on.
The return of... No,
the return.
Oh, God, please. I can't... Anyway, so that one.
Yeah.
Guy Hates a Girl Who Comes On Too Strong. And then the bottom tier, which should be indicative in no way of where we're going to put these characters, but am I gonna die? From the remake, Laurie Strode, Scout Taylor Compton said that line memorably in Halloween 2. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
Absolutely. And I just want to point out that 11 of the 16 that we have here today, we did previously rank, and all of them, like, they were spread across every single one of these tiers when we did it. So it'll be interesting to see, because we did that like a year ago or more. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what our perspective is today as we do that. Because I think that, our perspectives just get sharper the more and more we go, who watches something and then just like their opinion of it, it just becomes, obviously we can watch movies and like hate them more and more over time, but I just feel like our understanding of something just becomes sharper as we continue to watch and be a fan or a hater of things over a long period of time. Also with
re-examine and be more specific. Absolutely.
Yeah. And with also what I had mentioned about just Friday the 13th and how I don't consider that to be a remake, all of the movies we've got here, mind you, I may as well say who we've got, who we're talking about here. But every single one of these movies is a remake. Some of them like a little bit more loosely based on it, but for the most part, most of these characters are the same character. Some of them have different names. There are maybe one or two exceptions where it's just like a completely different character altogether, but it's the similar scenario. So we tried our best. We wanted to have a variety of different people. So I'll go through the list of what we've got here. So for Prom Night, the original is Kim Hammond, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in the 1980 movie, and then Donna Keppel, played by Brittany Snow in the 2008 remake. We've got Sally Hardesty, played by Marilyn Burns in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, as well as Jessica Biel playing Erin Hardesty in the 2003 remake. We've got Olivia Hussey playing Jess Bradford in the OG Black Christmas, 1974, and then Kelli Presley, played by Katie Cassidy in the 2006 version. We've got, oh my gosh, what's the actress's name who plays Andy's mom, or Karen Barkley? Catherine Hicks.
I was
Catherine
spot, and I'm like, oh, my phone.
Catherine Hicks.
Yes, of course, it's Catherine Hicks.
Yeah,
yes,
Karen Barkley.
Attention must be paid.
In
we
Child's
love you,
Play.
Hicks.
Yeah, in Child's Play 88.
Not to show our hand.
Don't show your hand. And then Karen Barkley, played by Aubrey Plaza in the 2019 Child's Play. We've got Jamie Lee Curtis, again, playing Laurie Strode in the OG Halloween 1978. And Scout Taylor Compton playing Laurie Strode in Halloween 2007. Then we have Vera Miles playing Lila Crane in the original Psycho, 1960, and Julianne Moore playing Lila Crane in Psycho, 1998. Heather Langenkamp as Nancy Thompson in the OG Nightmare on Elm Street, 84, versus, what's her name? The actress?
Rooney Mara.
Rooney Mara playing Nancy Holbrook in the 2010 remake. And then we have oh my gosh, do you know the actress's name? Actually, you have it right here.
In what? Yeah, I sent it.
Carolyn Craig playing Nora Manning in the original House on Haunted Hill. This was 1959 versus Ali Larter playing Sarah Wolfe in the 1999 remake of House on Haunted Hill. So these are all the ones that we're going to be talking about today. A varied list. Which Edward came up with entirely on his own, as you did for this idea as well. So you pulled a lot of weight here. So credit where credit is due. But
Thank you. But you gave the green light, so it's collaboration.
it's true.
Collaboration.
Yeah. It has a run. It has a run button. So okay,
Mr. Boss Man.
let me pass it off to you then. You wanna kick us off with the first pairing that we're going to be talking about here?
Sure. First one we're discussing in the order I sent you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking Psycho with the Lila Crane showdown. I guess we'll open with Vera Miles, who we actually I think I paid a great deal of attention to her in our discussion on the previous pod. So I'll just reiterate a few points, and if anything else comes up, it comes up. But interesting in 1960 what a final girl by default is kind of like allowed to achieve. I think she's staunch in her insistence that they continue to pursue this hunt for her sister who's missing, Marion Crane. And but it's funny because it's all kind of shaded with, I think, trappings of what not feminism, but what femininity is supposed to look like around like 1960. Because even though she's very, very strong, she's also, she speaks in very hushed tones and, very, and very apologizes profusely if she seems to overextend herself. One example for me is when she and Sam Loomis of Psycho have gone to the sheriff's house to find out what went on at the Bates Motel and everything. And she's becoming very insistent, and the sheriff kind of gives her a look, and she's just kind of like, look, I'm sorry if I seem over anxious. It's just, I'm sure something went on in that house, and I have to find out what. And so, I mean, she's still strong, but like still also very like, oh, I must realize my place. I must remember, that I am, a person who can't insist her way into the truth. Basically.
Yeah, I imagine that in 1960, you would look at like a woman like Lila Crane, as portrayed by Vera Miles, and that she would probably be not your like every type of woman, especially like in movies, unless you're like Betty Davis, where everyone was like a lady and proper. And I mean, like you could look at it through 2024 lens of this character, and just like nothing seems all that off. But at the time, that like insistence that she has, and just like, and almost like there is like a confrontational nature to her that would probably be off-putting in that time. Like that would be considered unladylike, or that she might be aloof, or just like any sort of like negative connotation that you could put onto a woman who is a little bit more strong-willed. So I mean, this is going to be a hard comparison, because we're essentially, it's the same script, it's the same, like everything is almost the same. It's just sort of it's hard to even balance like the eras that they came out in, because so much of the 1998 Psycho is like almost like trying to emulate the 1960 temperament, but it's like this whole movie in general, and we'll talk about it like fully on the podcast at one point, but it's like I find it so fascinating. Like, it's not a good movie, but I find it so fascinating because it is like it's an experiment in filmmaking. I don't think that anything really like this has ever been made before or after it, just especially in terms of remakes. So it's interesting in that regard. But with Julianne Moore, what I think that she's the best part of the movie, of the remake.
She was one of those cases that I was discussing where watching it through her lens, and I only did watch her parts because I know the movie and I know even that movie. I've seen it multiple times, but it made it so much easier to watch just focusing on her the entire time.
And it's interesting because in both cases, Vera and Julianne are second build, I believe, like after Anthony and Vince, respectively. And it's interesting because like the character Lyla has very little screen time. Like, this was probably the easiest movie to rewatched because I just like skimming through their parts specifically because there's so few scenes and they're mostly relegated to the back half of the movie because she doesn't really make her first appearance until she goes into Sam's shop. I did notice though, and I'd never noticed this before because I haven't watched the remake a whole lot, but the scene where they're at the church, you know, when the sheriff's wife is just like, you can come by the house later, it'll be nicer. That doesn't exist in the remake.
No.
They just go right from when he's taking the mother down to the fruit cellar to Sam and Lyla in the car on their way over, where they're just like, we're gonna check in as husband and wife and look around.
Yeah. Well, even that, like, the line is man and wife, and they make Julianne Moore say that line, and she just kind of throws it away in a way that she should, because you don't want to call any attention to it, because no one in 1998 was going to say, we're going to register as man and wife. Yeah. But but one thing about Julianne Moore and the way she kind of, like, I would say dominates the space in a way that Vera Miles didn't, and probably wasn't allowed to, you know, like at that particular, like it would have come off very differently if Vera Miles would have played it anywhere near where Julianne Moore was coming from. They would have been like, who's this bitch? But from the moment Julianne Moore, as Lyla marches into Sam's store, there's an assertiveness and a directness. And like, she has absolutely no time to waste. She wants to know where her sister is, and she has no problem raising her voice. And even there's one point where in the original, there's a few, because that's the thing. People talk about what a replica it is, and it is not at all. Yeah. But there's just a bunch of elements that where there's a lot of crossover. But if you go, you know, we'll have that pod and we'll go down the list of everything that's different. Yeah. But one of the differences that as it pertains to these characters is when Lyla first confronts Sam and says, like, you know, it's none of my business if you two are in this together. But if that's the case, then I want Marion to come here and tell me it's not my business, and then I'll go. And when Vera Miles delivers that, it's scripted that she has to break down into tears and turn away, you know, and just kind of like wipe her face and go, sorry about the tears, you know, like, sorry about my fragile womanhood. But I'm emotionally distraught. I'm hysterical. You know how us women are. Yeah. And whereas Julianne Moore, that's a point where she raises her voice and doesn't care. You know, and there is no apology made for any kind of, like, you know, like, I'm making waves. And she even, again, the way she bounces off of the other actors, Arbogast in the original comes in and seems to also, he's the one who dominates that scene in Sam's shop in the hardware store where, because he's the man kind of like with, I guess, the most most access to information, and the one who seems to kind of like trying to be seeing the truth or whatever. Whereas I feel like he looks kind of ridiculous in comparison to Lyla, Julianne Moore's Lyla in the remake, because here he is with like this fedora and he leans back and just kind of like, yeah, let's all talk about it. And I'm like, shut up, you. She's the one. She seems to be the one who has like the instincts that make her a much better detective than he is. Like, you know, like everything about the way she kind of like seems to be directing Sam in the truck as they're driving to the hotel. It's much more about her giving him, this is what you're going to do, and this is what I'm going to do, and then we're going to go in, then we're going to, until we find Marion, we're not going to leave that place.
Do you think that maybe that was a case of William H. Macy as Arbogast being miscast, or is it just maybe that Julianne Moore was too much of a powerhouse for this role? Because she does come in, like, cause, you know, just what I was saying before, it's just like when you look at the temperament of like the times that these came out, this was 38 years later, that what would Lila Crane look like in 1998 if she came in there? Like, she would be more assertive, she would be more you know, ball busting and would be more prone to raising her voice and just like, I'm not going anywhere until I get what I want, and I'm gonna embarrass you if I have to.
Yeah, and she also, I really love the way she can even put on airs. Like, there's an exchange between Lyla and Norman in the remake that isn't there, and based on how it informs the movie, that's a different story. But just as far as the character, Norman is having the two of them sign in, and he just kind of glances at Lyla, and she just kind of like, in the original, she just kind of placidly smiles and just kind of averts her eyes. Whereas in the remake, she winks at him almost like reflexively, like, hey, buddy. And he winks right back. So we're talking about a completely different dynamic at work. Like, you know, she's a smooth operator. She knows how to work her wiles, and she knows how to kind of like get guys to drop their guard. Like, I'm not worth, you know, being suspicious of. Just, you know, just take it easy, baby. Wink. And but I also love the way when they're walking away, Sam keeps trying to put his arm around Julianne Moore's Lyla, and she keeps kind of like inching away. And even as they're walking away, like Norman's watching them, and he touches her back, and she kind of like looks at him like, "What the fuck are you doing? Get your hands off me!"
Yeah,
and,
like she's the most like out of like the whole cast. You know, I said that she was my favorite part, as she is for you, but it's just like she's the one that feels the most evolved. Like she's almost in 1998, and everyone else is kind of in varying points in history where this movie is concerned. And that's the thing, like in the original, I can like look at Janet Leigh and Vera Miles, and even though they don't have any screen time together, I mean, like, okay, these two are sisters. Whereas here, you look at Julianne Moore, and then you look at like Anne Heche as Marion Crane, and just like, there is no fucking way that these two are sisters. Like, they don't even look alike, for one. But there's just like...
Well, I mean... they both have like those small frame faces, like very compact features with very high cheekbones and pale skin. I mean, I didn't have a problem with that.
I think my favorite part, though, my favorite alteration in the original, when they're about to go to the sheriff's, and Lila's just like, "Let me go get my coat," and she runs back. But this time, now it's, "Let me get my Walkman." And the thing that makes that so hilarious to me is that they're about to go in the car and drive to the sheriff's place, and she's insisting on having her Walkman. So that to me implies that she's going to sit in the car and just listen to her music by herself and not even engage in conversation with Sam. It's like,
and also,
I have to drive with you? Okay,
store.
let me get my Walkman.
And I am not coming back to this store. If we find Marion, I hope I never see you again later. Yeah. But I also remember reading at the time in Out magazine, of all things, Julianne Moore was on the cover, and I got all excited. I was like, oh, Julianne Moore's gay! And no, but it was about Psycho. She was promoting Psycho and talking about how
Ron
she
Clarice
wanted to play the character. Yeah, she wanted to play, but she wanted to play Lila Crane as a lesbian and never have it spelled out in the script. But that was also part of what kind of like gave her direction, which I don't know if that kind of. I wonder how that would go over if somebody put it that way. Because at the time, it felt like, oh, great, bring more inclusion, more representation. I wonder if people would be like, so what does a lesbian act like? You know, like, I wonder how that would go over. Yeah. But I know that she was inspired to kind of like move away from Vera Miles' interpretation because she knew that it wouldn't work for 1998 audiences. But I also think... one of the moments that stood out to me the most, because you talked about Walkman, what I love and what I remember hearing in the audiences, because I watched it twice in a row the night that I went to go see it at the theater, just to kind of wrap my head around it. I was like, this is a mind fuck. Did I really see this? So I watched it again. And I remember in both screenings, the women in the audience, when the discovery is made, Norman comes down and he's all in the remake, you know, decked out with the blonde wig and the kimono and whatnot, and starts to go at her, and then he's stopped by Sam, and the two of them are wrestling around a little bit more so than the original staging. Rather than stand aghast the way Vera Miles did, Julianne Moore's Lyla just moves toward him and kicks his face so he can collapse onto the floor and just be a little more disoriented. And I heard women cheering. And I was just kind of like, and watching it again during the screening, the more I watched that movie, the more I realized in this context, because of the way Vince Vaughn plays him, this Norman Bates is much more of a predator, you know, against women. He's much less just kind of like a sick man-child who's in arrested development and who can't help what he does, which I think is very much the way Hitchcock displayed him. Gus Van Sant's Norman is sicker and harder to sympathize with. And so when you see him get a kick from the sister of one of the women that he murdered, it's kind of like, yes, you know, like there was this bombast and this exhilaration experienced by my audiences, and I was just kind of like, okay, I guess that's where we are with this particular incarnation. But in defense of Vera Miles' Lyla, one thing that I noticed the last time we discussed this movie, the original movie, was something about the way she found strength in her passivity. I was never more interested in her than when she actually wasn't speaking and when she was just reacting to the people around her and just seeing how things resonated with her. She gave dimension to a part that could have just been a stock character. Yeah. So I think the performance shone through a little bit more than the role. Yeah. You know, might have allowed her to. So.
Yeah, and the moment that you're talking about, just like the kicking in the head, because I mean, like that's just a little flourish that, you know, it doesn't really deviate all that much from the original. But like we've had this conversation before where you've kind of criticized movies, like for instance, Halloween Resurrection, when Busta Rhymes is going toe to toe with Michael in like the kung fu, and then Sara, as the character's name, jumps on Michael's back to kind of like just to get involved, to participate, to show that she's a strong woman. and I agree, rightfully so. Like it's just like it's not empowering because it's just showing that like here's a female character who's just to show that they're there, but really they're not capable. Like the most that they can do is sort of slow them down for a second. They're not actually doing anything productive. Like it's like the same circumstance it would play out exactly the same way whether they jumped on his back or not. And I see that like with Lyla at the end there, Julianne Moore kicking him in the head. It's more of just like, yeah, like one for the women. Whereas like if they were really trying to do a retelling of this, and obviously they were really, or like Gus Van Sant was like really bound to the exact same script, there would have been a reversal. Like Julianne Moore's Lyla would have actually had a lot more agency in taking down Norman rather than it being Viggo Mortensen playing Sam. So it just seemed like it was just one of those things to like, you know, to tick a box and just be like, yeah, we did that. We had like the female empowerment, even though it's like, is it really empowering? Like she was given an opportunity to, cause like the guy came in and he restrained him and then she came over and she's like, take that. So it's,
I mean, I hear that. Yeah. Again, not very final girl, but also, like we said, this was a character who, like, isn't often included in the final girl discussion and is seen, I think, more as a survivor of the movie than the movie's designated final girl. So, I mean, I agree, like, it's very limiting to kind of, like, try and still kind of color new shades within the same lines on the paper, you know, like and try and create something without like veering too much out of it. But I mean, I guess it was just like you said, like a kind of a quick fix from having her just kind of stand there with her jaw dropped and go, oh my gosh, what is this? You know, because that wouldn't fly either, I feel, if she just stood there.
Yeah.
So
and the last thing I'll say the last thing I'll say is that I can't remember if we talked about this on the Psycho 2 podcast, or it might have been a comment from someone on the YouTube or in my Patreon, but they said, and I'm sorry I forget who this was, but they said that they need to remake Psycho 2 with Julianne Moore and Vince Vaughn, like now, like do it now while it's still within the timeline.
Oh my god, that was another thing. Like I was looking at the actors in the movie, and all I could think was Vince Vaughn looks so young and Julianne Moore looks exactly the same.
She does. I was like trying to like, how old is Julianne Moore now? Because she does look exactly the same. Good for her.
Like gorgeous, timeless beauty. Good for her.
Okay, what are we thinking for the Lilas?
Well, I mean, obligatory kick notwithstanding, I was really arrested by Julianne Moore's interpretation of this role. I feel like she did more with it than arguably anybody else who's involved with the remake. So to start with her, I'd be comfortable even putting her into I Am Into Survival.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so now
that's a
the
little too
conversation
high.
happens.
That's a little too high for
Okay,
me.
where do you see her?
Well, I think she can handle a sick old woman.
She definitely can.
Yeah.
She asserted that she can, and I believe her.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put her there. So Lila Crane, 1998.
And the the Vera Miles one.
And then the Vera Miles one. I think she can handle a sick old woman too, but I'd put her below Lila Crane, 1998. How about you?
Yeah, I'd say I think taking into consideration that this is 1960 and for its time, this is still like, you compare and contrast them like that. Like if Julianne Moore existed in 1960 and was playing that role at the same age, like she would have played it the way, I mean, not exactly, but just, would have been directed to play it the way that Vera Miles was. So I concur. I think that I can go with that, and I would say below. And what's interesting is we had Julianne Moore in I Can Handle a Sick Old Woman originally when we did the last ranking, and we actually had Vera Miles in What Is Going On. So Vera Miles moved up.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I know, because she knows what's going on.
She does, yeah. She's just in the wrong era. Yeah.
She's not afraid of coming on too strong, and she knows what's going on, so she gets to be above those tiers now. Good for you, Vera Miles.
So now we've got Black Christmas, Jess Bradford versus Kelli Presley. Mm-hmm. You want to lead us in?
Okay. Well, we covered OG Black Christmas from 1974.
We did, yeah.
And again, like I sang a lot of accolades for Jess Bradford. I still I still appreciate the hello, pardon, who when she answers the phone.
It's the Mona.
Yes, right.
And just imagine her going to see like the Mona Lisa and just be like, it's the Mona Lisa. It's much smaller in person.
What? I'm raising my voice. You'd like me to take it down. Anyway, one thing that I don't remember mentioning in the original pod that always stood out to me was also just her introductory sweater that she's wearing at the party with the hands on it.
The hands across the chest, yeah.
Yeah, or, well, the torso, certainly. And I remember just thinking, there's something very violating, like almost prescient, in a prescient way. Just kind of like, he's got you in his clutches kind of way that jumped out to me.
I saw it more as like a hug.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
To me, it had more... No, because she's wearing it. This is something that she's chosen of her own collection, and she's put it on. It didn't. It felt like she had control over that. It was within her agency to wear it. Like I saw it more just like it seemed like protective and peaceful.
Oh, okay. For me, it felt more like it was juxtaposed against outdoor shots of like, a stranger looking at the sorority house, and then you see hands on her.
The only thing that
shit.
that reminds me of that I always get a kick out of referencing this movie because I know you hate it so much. But in Burlesque, when they're doing that number and like they've got those, it's like the same things, like the hands on the wherever they're sewn onto the thing. Watch the movie again. You'll remember.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. But sure, I'll take your word for it. How about that?
Yeah.
But I mean, really early on, we see that she draws a boundary with her boyfriend Peter, even about when she's going to break news to him over the phone. He keeps insisting that she tell him, and she's just kind of like, "No, I'm going to do it on my own time." And I love the fact that he even says, "I love you" as they're hanging up in that initial phone call, and she just says, "I know." And I'm just going to like, you got there before Han Solo. Rock, bitch. But then once she does have this kind of sit down with him the next day, she's direct and honest about her feelings and what her plans are. And just basically is including him not in on the decision, but certainly on the information which she, I think, judges correctly.
Right.
Maybe, I mean, that's for anybody to judge for themselves. I won't say she does it correctly. it's correct because it's her decision to make him privy to this decision she's making. But and then he makes it all about him and tells her to get out of his little piano hall there. And I like that she even just respects that boundary and doesn't try to apologize or try to continue talking with him. She's just like, fine, peace out, and she leaves. and and then she's got other things going on because Claire's gone missing, and when she's the one who contacts Chris, Claire's boyfriend, to let her know, like, Claire's missing, we got to do something about this. Here's all I know. Everything about the character dictates, it's such a shift from where we've come from Lyla, even, like, I won't address the other ones yet, but just even from, like, Lyla, like, this is about, like, 14 years difference in what we're allowing young women to kind of like do on screen, and she's already so incredibly self-possessed and sure about what she's doing because it's what's right for her, so that's what makes it the right decision. And I don't ever see her doubting that. And I
for her sisters as well, because she is kind of the one who's leading the charge. Not in a way that she's like telling everyone like what to do, but she's always kind of like at the center of the go like taking them to the police station or whatever. And you have characters like Barb who are just like, it seemed like Barb would be happy to just like be drinking and not do anything, but she's kind of like almost like encouraging them to like, okay, we got to do this, and everyone is going along with it and just being like, because they're concerned about Claire, and it's all mostly due to Jess just being this sister who clearly is nurturing to the people around her. And that's something that with Kelli is on the surface there, like they're like, it's almost like her, the scene where we're introduced to her, she has this whole bit about how it's important that she spends time with her sisters because she doesn't have any like biological sisters, and yada yada yada. And other than just like saying that, and like there are like little bits here and there, but it's just like she's just kind of there for most of the movie. And she's the blonde one, like everyone is brunette, so she kind of stands out a little bit more because of that. But she's just sort of like the sweet one. Like everyone else is being catty and they're just like making digs into one another or just talking shit about the people who aren't in the room. She's just like, I'm so happy to be here with you people. And it's just like, but why? Like, why? Like, you don't like these girls. They don't like you. But she's wrapping gifts. She's just smiling and she's actually like, of all of the girls there, I think she says the least. She has like, until like she's more so just the only one left. But all the other personalities, it's just like the casting in this movie is really good. Because they have Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Lacey Chabert, Michelle Trachtenberg, and like each one of them is infusing a very unique personality to it. Even like the other girl, I don't know the actress's name, but the one who's kind of like the Barb proxy, I would say, the one who's just like drunk and throwing up and just being obnoxious. So she's just kind of, it's almost like it's like a lack of a personality with her for a lot of the movie.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are no real bold character defining qualities about her besides being a pretty decent person, which, is cool. Like it's fun to see her kind of like have fun while observing her friends really kind of actively pursuing the fun. Mm-hmm. And she's just like a sensitive girl who can empathize with her sisters. But until she argues with Mrs. Mack, played by Andrea Martin, not reprising her role from the first movie because spoilers, Phil dies, but about being safer when they stay together. Like that's when she really starts to kind of like stand her ground. And then she's actually pretty fucking tough, I think, in the climactic battle.
Oh, absolutely.
While predominantly like with Agnes, but when Billy makes his presence known, she gets like she gets some help from Lee, Claire's sister, and that's good. But I mean, I in the epilogue, I think that's when I can't wait to talk about this movie. But when she shocks the shit out of Agnes, like like a hardcore badass, you
yeah,
know, like,
like
in the 2000s.
like, you know,
as they would define
Sydney
it.
to Jill pre-Scream 4.
Yeah.
The well, there was one scene when she is, I think the girl's name is Megan or whatever. There's so many fucking girls in this house. It's just like, where are they?
Yeah.
Nobody's like, where is everyone? But like, everyone's in like their own little spaces, and the one that I guess is her boyfriend is cheating on, or cheating with, and she's like, for whatever reason, she goes into the room, and this never made any sense to me. Because she just goes in while he's out in the hallway, and he's, you know, obviously trying to distract everyone, or he's continuing the story about Billy. And Kelli goes in, and she's just like rummaging through things. Like there's no reason or purpose until later on, and she says, "Well, I'm just trying to see if there's a note." But it's like, you were like full on, like you're like going into like private personal places. Like, what are you looking for? Exactly. Like if she was going to leave a note, it wouldn't be here. So that was just like a very strange decision that they made for this character, essentially just to get to the point where she sees the computer screen and then the still frame of the two of them fucking, where she can find out that he's trash.
Right. I mean, because that's another thing. Like the fact that she's even introduced, like, kind of like within that context of her boyfriend, as opposed to the way Jess is introduced within the context of her sisters. Like, first off, I do kind of like where Kelli begins and ends, though, because they do kind of introduce her in this kind of like, well, you could be anybody way. And then by the end of it, she is kind of like the undeniable victor of the movie. Like she wins. She wins the movie. But whereas with Jess, it's much more varied and nuanced, because even though I feel like we're kind of always on her side, although some people aren't when she doesn't leave the house when she's told that the call's coming from inside the house. You and I already discussed, you know, like what a strength we see that as for her, because her friends might not be dead. What if they're just hurt or incapacitated and they need help? So that's where her heart and her mind are when she runs up those stairs. And she doesn't do it without a weapon either. She takes that like fire iron up with her, and she doesn't drop it until her boyfriend is dead, who she suspects is the killer, you know, like, and even then she's still holding it when she's laying there with his dead body, like, you know, his skull just like they're leaking blood onto her lap. And then the way she ends is not really her fault, because she's immediately drugged and just kind of left there, you know, to lay unconscious for 4 hours while everybody evacuates the house. That's not her fault, but the fact that the movie leaves her there is a little bit bleaker and more dismal to me.
Whereas this has like more of like a girl boss finale of just like kicking ass and doing all that. And I actually really enjoy. I really like Katie Cassidy. I actually think, you know, we haven't gotten to the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, but she's also in that. She's playing the updated version of Tina, the Amanda Wyss, or is it Weiss?
It's
Wyss character. And I thought that she was much better in that movie than she was in this movie, just in terms of what she was playing there. And not to say that she's bad here, because this is another case of just like it's the material that she has to work with.
Yes.
Because I think that like there's definitely the moments there where like the confrontation when Miss Mac is leaving, and she's just like, "No, we do not leave our sisters behind," sort of thing. And it's like the good intentions that just kind of like fall to the wayside, because she's not able to save any of her sisters. Even like the character played by, is it Kristen? She was in Final Destination, the one that plays the older sister of Claire.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Because she's,
I can't remember her.
She kind of, I'm looking it up here.
Okay.
Kristen Cloak. There's a moment between the two of them and the boyfriend Kyle before he gets his comeuppance, because he's just like, "You're not even sisters," or whatever. Like he just says something to that effect, and the sister, like the older sister of Claire, says just like, "She is now," or something to that effect. Something of just like, we now have this bond, and it goes into the finale, and they're like trauma bonded, and then immediately like she gets killed off, and it's like,
Yeah.
Okay, like you have nothing to show for anything that you went through other than the fact that you killed them. And I mean, sometimes that's enough, but I feel like with everything they were so heavy-handed with, just about like the sisterhood and this and that and how it was so important to her, it felt like a failure for her that she wasn't able to save anyone in that regard.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like the connective tissue between Kelli and Jess is probably they're both incredibly decent people who we like, who have shitty boyfriends, and that kind of ends there.
Yeah, they are not the same character at all. They don't even have the same name, so.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one thing in terms of like, again, like it feels very 2006, like the confrontation she has with her boyfriend once it kind of like becomes clear that he's cheating on her. But one direction that I like about the movie is she becomes about more than her world is not consumed by him. Well, actually, that's another similarity because Jess's world isn't consumed by Peter either. But she spent kind of like the first half of that movie. Her default is just keep going back to like worrying about your boyfriend, looking for your boyfriend, talking about your boyfriend, whatever. And then once he's out, and then it's all about my sisters and me. Yeah. Basically, and with Jess, like the way that manifests for me is, I think when Peter proposes to Jess in the original, I think she's smart enough to know that giving into his proposal, because he's like, you can still do all the things you want to do. When she's telling him, no, remember when you told me what you want to do and what your plan was, and now you're gonna go, you don't want to do it anymore. Well, I told you my plans too, and I still want to do those things. He's like, but you can. We just got to get married, and you'll do those things. And I think she knows if she marries him, no, because that's giving in once. You're giving in for like a lifetime. Yeah. He's gonna keep finding ways to talk you out of what you want to do, and that's another really admirable thing about her that I think might put her a little higher than Kelli for me. But what do you think as far as their placement in this?
Well, absolutely, Jess is above Kelli, and a lot of it just comes down to the writing. Because I mean, obviously Kelli can handle herself at the end, and that, not to say that Jess can't, but I mean, like, she does make the mistake of assuming the wrong person as the killer and this and that. But a lot of these things are out of her control, but it comes down to so much more. And like you said, there's more nuance to Olivia Hussey's character of where she kind of traverses through this theme of just like, kind of like just being a nice person and just like the shitty boyfriend and that. And I feel like everything with like the sister, the sorority sisters and that, and the protectiveness is inherent in both of these characters, where it's nuanced with Jess and with Kelli. It's very much just like it's written because that's what the script demanded.
Character shifts gears, becomes badass.
Yeah, I would put I would say that Jess, it would go in I Can Handle a Sick Old Woman. I would put Kelli in What Is Going On? And normally I would put her in A Guy Hates a Girl That Comes On Too Strong. But like I said, I really like Katie Cassidy. She was in the update of Melrose Place. She played Ella Sims. She was also the best part of that show. And when we stand someone, it just puts them up a little bit higher. So
it's funny that you say that, because I actually love Katie Cassidy for almost the opposite reason, because she's also she played a character on Arrow, the DC superhero show, and in my opinion, I haven't finished the series yet, but I'm in season 4. She is the worst character, I think, that they have, as a principal character there every week, and yet I don't hate her. She plays her to the best of her ability. She's always fully invested, and I have nothing but admiration for her as a performer. I just wish, I'm like, write Laurel better, guys. Come on. She's kind of wishy-washy and crying over a guy all the time, and then, no, I'll be fine. That's my trajectory. It's like, oh dear God. But anyway,
she was big on the CW. She was in all those shows, and she went head to head with Amanda Woodward and beat her. So
whoa,
I know, right?
Wow.
She took some of her Final Girl energy and brought it to Melrose Place.
But
it
I mean,
still does not hold a
take...
candle to the original Melrose Place, but she made it.
And I think one of the reasons I think I'm comfortable keeping not even Katie Cassidy, but Kelli in the What Is Going On tier is probably the amount of screen time she has just kind of being passive. Like, they could have made her a little bit more proactive, and especially when you have such a beautiful example set for you, and to have it be kind of a step back. Like, okay, yeah, she can go there. And then where in I Can Handle a Sick Old Woman would you put Jess?
Well, where would you say?
I think she deserves to be above both Lilas.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
She's written better.
I agree with you, and I will do that. I just want to point out that when we did our rankings earlier, she was actually below Remake Lyla.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, no. Yeah.
That was before
we
did that before we covered Black Christmas on the podcast. Though.
Okay. No, that was a mistake. Yeah. I'm glad we've rectified that.
All right. Awesome. Well, if you've made it this far, this is going to be the end of the preview. So head over to Patreon, Zach Cherry, and subscribe to the Freddy Krueger tier to catch the rest of this episode. Thank you for watching and listening to this preview.